Howdy folks, how are we all doing? I'm the Reverend Danny Crosby, a Unitarian minister serving congregations in Altrincham and in Urmston in the northwest of England. I hope you're able to find the love that is present and witnessing the blessings in life in these difficult times. It is hard, my friends, but we're all in this one together, and I'm offering these devotions as my little bit of hope, doing what I can, playing my role, being a part of the solution. These devotions are offered as a balm for the heart, the mind, the spirit and the soul. And the title for today's reflection is Called to Care. So I invite us just to still ourselves together now. Let's invite a loving presence to be here amongst us and to awaken from deep, deep within us. I have lit the flame of freedom in the cup of belonging, acceptance and love. We join together in our physical separation, but united in our devotion to life and to love. May we enter this time in affirmation and devotion to life. Let us learn to celebrate our faith. Faith in God, faith in life, faith in ourselves. And may we leave this time and space having felt that we have grown in spirit. Let us come together in peace and goodwill. Let us join together knowing our own needs and our frailties. Let us join together in search for meaning. Let us join together knowing that we are in the presence of the divine. Amen. Now I'm going to begin this devotion with a story which can be found in many cultures and traditions. Following this story, a short reflection by Henri Nouwen, and finally a reflection inspired by so many and so much, but by myself, my own little reflection. But I'll begin with the tale. So once upon a time, long, long ago in Japan, a woman prayed that God would show her the difference between heaven and hell. She wanted to know whether there were fires in hell or whether the people in heaven sat on clouds all day playing harps. She didn't fancy going to either place if that was all that they had to offer. She prayed so hard that God decided to answer her prayer, and he sent an angel to give her a guided tour of both places. Angels are good like that, you know. First she went to hell. It wasn't hot at all. In fact, it looked quite pleasant. There were long tables laden with foods of all kinds, cooked meats, vegetables, fruit, delicious pies and exotic desserts. This can't be hell, she thought, and then she looked at the people. They were sitting some distance from the tables, and they were all miserable, emaciated, pale and angry. Each of them had chopsticks fastened to their hands, but the chopsticks were about 3 feet long, and no matter how hard they tried, the people just couldn't get the food into their own mouths. They were groaning with hunger and frustration and anger. "I've seen enough," said the woman. "May I see heaven now?" So the angel took the woman to heaven. And you know what? She didn't have far to go at all. It was just next door. It was almost the same as hell. It certainly looked the same. There were the same kind of tables, the same food, and here too the people were sitting a little distance away from the tables with 3 feet long chopsticks fastened to their hands. But these people seemed happy. They were rosy cheeked and looked well fed. They were smiling and chatting merrily to each other. They couldn't put the foods in their own mouths either, but they discovered another way to be fed. They were feeding each other. And that's the difference between heaven and hell. They may look the same, but experience very differently. And here's some words by Henri Nouwen on care. Real care is not ambiguous. Real care excludes indifference and is the opposite of apathy. The word care finds its root in the Gothic cara, which means lament. The basic meaning of care is to grieve, to experience sorrow, to cry out with. I am very much struck by this background of the word care, because we tend to look at caring as an attitude of the strong toward the weak, of the powerful toward the powerless, of the haves towards the have-nots. And in fact, we feel quite comfortable with an invitation to enter into someone's pain before doing something about it. Still, when we honestly ask ourselves which persons in our lives mean the most to us, we often find that it is those who, instead of giving much advice, solutions or cures, have chosen rather to share our pain and touch our wounds with a gentle and tender hand. The friend who can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief and bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and face with us the reality of our powerlessness. That is the friend who cares. You might remember moments in which you were called to be with a friend who had lost a wife or husband, a child or parent. What can you say, do, or propose at such a moment? There is a strong inclination to say, don't cry, the one you loved is in the hands of God. Don't be sad, because there are so many good things left worth living for. But are we ready to really experience our powerlessness in the face of death and say, I do not understand. I do not know what to do, but I am here with you. Are we willing to not run away from the pain, to not get busy when there is nothing to do, and instead stand rather in the face of death together with those who grieve? You know, we're all called to care in our own ways. We're seeing much of that at the moment. People doing what they can in their different ways to care for one another in ways that they can. I think one of the saddest words that you will ever hear in the English language is, I don't care. I don't care. Who amongst us can say that they have never uttered them, if not out loud so that others could hear them, at least inwardly to themselves? I've said it. I said it many years ago and later denied doing so. I said it though, and I've regretted it ever since. It was at a moment in my life when I had sunk so far into the pain of my lost little self that I did not care anymore. I was in hell, and the uttering of those words proved it at that moment in time. Thankfully, although at times I do feel weariness towards life, it has been many years since I did not care. It has been many years since I experienced the pain and loneliness of indifference. And there's another phrase along this theme which I often hear spoken. I don't care what people think of me. Now, while I think I understand what people mean by this, that they are no longer ruled by the views of others, what matters is how they see themselves. There is something in this phrase that still bothers me though. I never want to reach the point where I do not care at all what people think of me. I never want to once again experience indifference in any way. While I am not ruled by the views of others, it matters to me what they believe about me, about life, about one another, about themselves. I care a lot. We care a lot, as Faith No More once sang. Now, as a child, I was considered overly sensitive, that I felt too much, that I took things personally. While it was thought of as a likeable quality, I know it has been seen as a serious handicap too. I remember my stepfather telling me I needed to toughen up, and he certainly tried to in ways that were not healthy when I was a child. All this really led towards me closing part of my humanity down. It did lead to a sense of indifference at some later stages of my life too, which led to some horrific feelings of loneliness, isolation and utter disconnection. Thankfully, I eventually saw the truth of this, and through love, I began to connect and care once again. This seeming blight has become an asset as I am able to care once more. It wasn't so much that I lost the sensitivity that I felt less. It was more that I recognised these feelings were not about me. I basically took things less personally. And I believe it was this that allowed me to begin to serve, to minister. To minister is simply to serve, and to serve is to care. It's about connection. It's about relationship. It's about bringing the loving space alive. I learned this through the example given to me by the Reverend John Midgley when he came and tried to be with both myself and many others during a horrific time in our lives. John couldn't heal or change anything. He was as powerless as we were, but he was able to be with us in our shared powerlessness, and somehow in this space, the healing power held us together. So if you want to know what heaven is, this is heaven. This is love. This is what it means to care. This is what it means to turn to as opposed to turn away despite the pain, fear and confusion. This is courage. To care takes courage, and courage comes from the heart. It is the heart alive and on fire. To not care is the way of the coward. To not care is a frozen state, and indifference requires a frozen state. Indifference is the way of the coward. I have heard hell described in many ways. What it means to be living in a state of hell, what that means described in many ways. I think the most accurate experience of hell is indifference. To feel indifference, that is hell. It's a sense of disconnection from the feelings and concerns of others. Hell is indifference. To live in hell is to be indifferent to the sufferings of others. Dante's Inferno described it thus. Here follows an extract from Dante's The Divine Comedy on Inferno, Hell, Canto 3. Dante Alighieri. Argument. Dante, following Virgil, comes to the gates of hell, where after having read the dreadful words that are written thereon, they both enter. Here, as he understands from Virgil, those were punished who had passed their time, for living it could not be called, in a state of apathy and indifference both to good and evil. Then pursuing their way, they arrive at the river Acheron, and there find the old ferryman Charon, who takes the spirits over to the opposite shore, which, as soon as Dante reaches, he is seized with terror and falls into a trance. So you see, hell is indifference. Hell is not fire, but in actual fact a frozen state. A state where a person no longer cares and has grown cold towards others, towards life itself. This little reflection began with a story, heaven and hell. Heaven and hell appear exactly the same, and yet they are experienced oh so differently. In hell, all go hungry because everyone tries to feed themselves only. They are purely self-focused and fail to recognise the hunger in their neighbour sat opposite them. And yet in heaven, they attempt to feed one another and are therefore fed in abundance. To me, this is as much about the relationship as the food going into each other's mouths. It's about relationship. I believe we all possess an innate need to serve one another, that if we do not do so, this part of our natural humanity withers away and it dies off. By not serving one another, we starve our own souls. By living with indifference towards others, we live frozen, unfeeling lives. Yes, hell is not a fiery place, but a frozen state of being, one where nothing touches, where one is cut off from others, from life itself. Yes, hell is indifference, but it's also disconnection. Hell is a place where nothing connects. You see something similar to the chopstick story happening in the feeding stories told in the Gospels, accounts that are more about the relationship between Jesus and his disciples and the people in the crowds, not whether a few loaves and fish could feed so many. It's about the relationships. There's a deep truth being revealed in the universal mythos found in these stories. They are talking about abundant love being poured out in these deeply connective and connecting relationships. The key phrase in the account found in Mark chapter 8 verses 1 to 9 are the words, "They ate and they were filled." They ate and they were filled. In this account, the crowd's hunger is acknowledged, compassion is recognised, and care is shown. The crowd are invited to stay and sit, and the disciples are asked to feed them face to face. Thus they are truly cared for. Their common humanity is cared for. They eat and they are filled. They mattered. Every single one of them mattered. And this is what it means to truly care. To recognise one another face to face. This is just like heaven in the story that began this reflection. Heaven is to care and hell is to be indifferent. Heaven is connection and hell is disconnection. It is heaven that is the warm place and hell that's actually frozen over. You also heard some words by Henry Nouwen on the word care. He highlights its origin from the old English word caru, meaning sorrow, anxiety, grief, as well as burdens of mind, serious mental attention, from the Proto-Germanic word caro, meaning lament, grief, care. To really care is to truly feel another's sorrow, to cry out with them and to truly be with them. To care is to truly empathise and not merely sympathise. To truly care is to be with another. It's about meeting another in common human relationship. This is why indifference to not care is hell, as it's about breaking that sense of relationship. It is emptiness, it is loneliness. You know, it hurts to care, it really does. Which is why so often we turn away. No one likes to feel powerless, and to care is about recognising our singular powerlessness at times. It's also about recognising the healing power that can begin to grow from this powerless state, as the common grief is recognised and shared, and the healing comes in that very, very space. This is the power of love. This is the miracle of healing that is recounted again and again in the gospel accounts. And it's that same love that comes alive once again when we recognise one another and truly care. Here we make heaven. Here we create the kingdom of love, the oneness of love, right here, right now. For heaven is a place where everything connects. Many people say that they feel lonely, that they experience a sense of disconnection, and no doubt at this time it's even stronger, as we physically can't be with each other, not face to face. We can through these screens and these stories and through other things, but we can't be with who we want to be. It can feel cold even in these sunny days. It can feel like it's winter. These feelings are not caused by the temperature of the air, but how we can feel at times. So how do we overcome these feelings? How do we warm our own hearts and those we share this world of ours with? Well, it begins in and through care. It begins by recognising what we have in common. It comes in recognising our shared sense of powerlessness at times. Gosh, we must feel that now. For actually, here's where the power comes alive, in living in loving relationships, in doing what we can for each other. And that means actually by staying physically apart. The last thing we want to do. But we're saving each other's lives by it. It's the most caring thing we can do. And it begins by reconnecting through care. So let's not become frozen people, indifferent people. Let us live in and through care. For in so doing, we will bring warmth to our lives and those that we share our lives with. So let's care a lot. We care a lot. We care a lot. We care a lot. As Faith No More once sang so wonderfully. So I'm going to end with this little reflection, just a few words of blessing to end the reflection. We need to bless more. You know, we can all bless. And we bless by giving our whole hearts to life, our whole being. So let's begin today. Let's give our whole hearts to life. So let's still ourselves while I offer these final words of blessing for today. May the love which overcomes all differences, which puts to flight all fears, which heals all wounds, which reconciles all who are separated. May this love be in us and among us, now and always. Let's care a lot. Let's care a lot. We care a lot. And may the love of God be with us all in all that we feel, in all that we think, in all that we say, in all that we do. Go in love. Amen.